Thanks to Form for giving me the opportunity to do a little talk about Open House. I've been doing a bit of a used car salesman's spiel about it for the last 5 years. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about the journey that it took to start up the event itself. And I guess recently, as the event's gotten a little bit older, I've been able to put a bit of a story behind it. And it actually, the journey predated when I thought it was. I graduated from architecture in 2003, and I don't know if many of you remember kind of what the cultural atmosphere was like at that point in time in Perth. It was pretty dead. So it was, I guess, what the papers used to call the brain drain. The economy, sorry, I'm standing on my tippy toes a little bit as well. It's quite embarrassing. The economy wasn't so great. So my graduating class at the time had about 20-odd people in it, and probably about the same at Curtin. And, oh, thank you. And for every job opportunity that was around, there'd be about 10 of us kind of lining up. So it was a really competitive atmosphere. And then once we were in those positions, the general work that we were doing, we felt was quite prosaic. I mean, we all thought that we'd go out into architecture and be given big felt pens and rolls of yellow trace and create the next iconic buildings in Perth. And instead, we ended up drawing toilets in elevation and tiling and things like that. So a lot of people, I guess, left Perth, not only in the architectural industry, but in other creative industries. And I myself applied for my working visa to the UK and went to move over there, and basically lasted about 5 weeks because it was too cold for me. And during those 5 weeks, I spent a lot of the time either shopping in Topshop or riding around at the top of double-decker buses, thinking about what was so good about London and why all my friends were there. And I didn't really understand why, given the weather was just so miserable. So the thing that occurred to me at the time was, well, London's great because it has pubs that are open later, or there's gallery shows, there's this, there's that. But what's stopping any of those things happening in Perth? And so I had literally like the kind of light bulb moment. Well, there's nothing. There's nothing stopping us doing any of the things here in Perth or in Western Australia that we want to happen. So I came back, and I was lucky my employers wanted me to draw up some more toilets, so I got my job back. And I started talking to my friends that were still in WA about what they thought about what was happening around. And we ended up coming up with this concept at the time called Unified. And what it was is a range of, or a bunch of graduates in various fields, from fashion design to architecture, interiors, graphics. And we put together an exhibit in the old Art Source building, which we're probably standing on the bones of that building as we speak. And we designed something, so we laid grass throughout the space and had it climbing up the walls, and we got Geoffrey London to open the exhibition. And lo and behold, about 2,500 people turned up on the first night. You couldn't move through the room. There were so many people. And Art Rage, who were great supporters at the time, allowed the exhibition to be open longer, so much so that the grass we planted actually was embedded firmly. It took quite a long time to bring it up. And so I guess there was the realization at that point that, if people come together, if they collaborate, if they talk, and if they have a true desire to make something happen in Perth, anything's kind of possible. But in all honesty, about 3 years later, I left and went to Sydney for a little while. But I came back, and I started working at a company called Hassel, who have an architecture practice here, who have been incredibly supportive of me. And I entered this thing called the Dulux Study Tour Award. And that ended up, I guess, changing things in a way that I didn't think was possible. And when I was putting my application together, you got 5 pages to basically describe why you thought you were deserving of a study tour, which my group went to London, Barcelona, and Copenhagen. 5 pages to distinguish yourself amongst the nation in terms of emerging architects. And so I thought, I'm going to use my favorite color, pink, because nobody else is going to do pink at all. And I set it up like a Facebook page because I thought, well, it's everybody does such great work. There's so many fantastic designers and creatives out there, but how do you distinguish yourself? And so going pink was another defining moment for me, which led to me. Oh no. Sorry. Which led to me being in London. And this is a friend of mine from my previous job photoshopped this up for me. It's not actually to real scale, just so you know. But it was here I was lucky enough to meet Victoria Thornton, who's the founder of Open House Worldwide. And she's probably got more energy as a 60-year-old woman than I've ever had after a giant can of Red Bull. Just a really, really, truly inspiring, person who Open House started in London over 20 years ago during the middle of a recession. And it was a bunch of people who said, well, what we're doing isn't valued within our community. So how do we find a way to explain the value? And they did so by opening great examples of design and architecture to the public as a free of charge event to say, well, this is the difference between good design and bad design is obvious if you get a chance to see it. And it's not about us as architects or designers talking down to people and saying this is what good design is. It's about giving everybody the opportunity to experience good design so that they understand it in a way that's very tactile and meaningful. So you can take it away with you and you can redo your house, or you understand when you walk into a cafe or a bar that it's better than the bar next door because the design's about atmosphere and it's not about personal style, but it's, about the feeling that you get from great spaces. So this is some of the early presentation work that we put together when we were thinking about, why is Open House important for Perth? Because when I first started talking to people about it, they thought I was mad. Why would anybody go into town to look at buildings? And for me, it was really obvious. I've traveled to different cities around the world, spent 12 hours on a train just to see a specific building. So why wouldn't people go into the city on their weekend to have a look at things? But people still kind of thought I was daft. So then we came up with this map, which was an early explanation about the fact that it's not just about opening buildings in Perth, it's about being part of a worldwide network or a worldwide family of cities that are promoting great design because they see the value of communicating good design to the public from a social, environmental, cultural, and sustainable aspect. And then we did some comparative studies as to what the different open houses look like and wanted to think a little bit about what the identity for Perth might be. And then we just started talking to a lot of people and holding a lot of sessions that involved a lot of beer and wine and coffee and snacks. And it was that process again of just opening up conversations to people about their level of interest and level of engagement. And we found that so many people began to be interested and wanted to be involved in what we were doing. It really, really took us kind of by surprise. Okay, so we've held 3 events now. The first event was in 2012. It took about a year to get to the first event. And since then, we've facilitated over 105,000 people through various destinations around the city and its fringe suburbs. Annually, we get about 70-odd thousand unique visitors to our website. And what's really interesting is when people get onto the website, they spend about 4.5 minutes on it, trying to find out about architecture and design in Perth. Of that, 20% of people are from outside WA. 14% are from the eastern states, predominantly Victoria and Queensland. And 6% internationally, predominantly from the UK and the US, which I guess was something that we didn't really plan for the event to be, but it's kind of, I guess, becoming a bit of a source for people to find out about Perth, in the same way that if you were going to a different country and you wanted to know what to see when you're in the city, our website has, I guess, helped people to understand a little bit more about Perth. I have this building. This is a house by Jonathan Lake Architects. I got a little bit emotional here last year. This is Jonathan's own house, which he opened up for last year's event on Sunday. And it had over 1,200 people through it in one day. So when I saw Jonathan towards the end of the day and he'd just clocked over 1,000 people, which, by the way, is roughly what we get through the Central Park building on a day, we had a bit of a teary moment, because it was this realization that people are incredibly interested and willing to go out and explore great spaces in Perth. And that's something that we don't give each other enough credit for. I think, generally speaking, when people from outside WA or when you're travelling ask you, where are you from? We go, Perth. We don't go, yeah, I'm from Perth, but groups form like Space Market, like Art Rage, like the Perth International Festival are just kind of accelerating how great the city is to be in and how fantastic the appeal is to people all over the world. And we're in a city that is fantastic and it's evolving and there's so many opportunities. And at the end of the day, it's all about supporting those opportunities. And nothing could really, be done without that support, without people like you guys in the room having that level of interest, but also communicating to your friends and your families about the value of what you've learned. I've got this slide up. This is one of my favourite stories from Open House Perth, because I run around during the course of the weekend, generally kind of putting emergency fires out, so to speak, and then hearing quirky stories. And this is the bottom of Brookville Place. A couple of years ago, we had the top of the BHP tower open, and there was one gentleman that spent his day lining up, going up to the top of the building, which I think is level 51 from memory. When the lift doors would open, he'd jump out, that's what I've been told, and go, yay! Have a walk around, go back down the lift, join the bottom of the queue, and do it all over again. And he did it about 5 times, and that was his whole Saturday for, I think, 2nd of November. So just flash through some quickly. Perth Arena was the first kind of really big one that we opened. Open House Junior. Also, we do it to kind of remember what we've lost in Perth as well. Some really great spaces. It's what I believe Perth can be. And it can be what you guys want it to be. So thank you.